All right, so you sent over some really interesting stuff about the U.S. prison system, and it seems like
Wow.
it's a lot more than just,
Oh, yeah.
locking people up.
Way more.
Yeah,
There are all these forces at play.
a whole web.
Yeah, so we're looking at a research brief today
Okay.
called The Prison Industry by Randall
Yeah.
G. Sheldon.
Mm-hmm.
It's from the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice.
Okay.
And we're gonna really try to use this deep dive to look beyond just the headlines
Yeah.
and figure out kind of what's going on here.
What other things that is really kind of striking is that the U.S. prison system is,
It's a global outlier.
yeah, you could say that.
It's not just standing out, it's
Yeah.
like in a category of its own.
Yeah,
The U.S. has 5% of the world's population,
right.
but holds 25% of its prisoners.
That's crazy.
I mean, what could possibly account for
Well,
that?
it's complicated. But the research points to a few key factors.
Okay.
One is the U.S. emphasis on just harsh sentencing laws.
Like the war on drugs.
3 strikes.
3 strikes laws, mandatory minimums.
Yeah.
These have led to much longer sentences than,
For things that wouldn't even be,
sometimes for offenses that wouldn't even be crimes in other countries,
or wouldn't be prison time.
or wouldn't even result in prison time in other countries.
So it's not just crime rates.
Yeah.
It's how we react to crime as a society.
Exactly right. Other countries prioritize social safety nets.
Okay.
Things like welfare programs, rehabilitation initiatives.
Instead of just punishment.
They're tackling the root causes, while the U.S. seems to favor punishment over addressing the underlying issues.
Well, it really makes you think about the long-term consequences
Right.
of those different approaches.
Absolutely.
But let's get into some of the economics.
Yep.
This is where Sheldon talks about the prison industrial complex.
Right.
It's more than just the prisons themselves.
It's this web
It's a whole network.
of connecting prisons, politicians, and the economy,
Yeah, almost like
like the Iron Triangle you see.
the Iron Triangle.
And the military-industrial complex,
Yeah.
there's all these
Vested interests.
vested interests driving policy and spending.
And are those...
And sometimes it's at odds with what's best for the public good.
Right. Are those interests actually aligned with public safety?
That's right.
Or is there something else?
In this case, there's a strong incentive to just keep the prison system expanding,
Right.
regardless of whether it's actually reducing crime or making communities safer.
And this isn't just theoretical.
Right.
There are actual concrete examples like what happened in Tennessee in 1983.
Oh, yeah.
CCA Corrections Corporation of America, one of the giants in the private prison industry, they actually tried to take over the entire state prison system.
Wow.
They had some powerful figures backing them up,
Like who?
including the head of the Tennessee Republican Party.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
So you see these political and economic forces all coming together.
Definitely. And, look at correctional spending.
How has that changed?
It's exploded from $9 billion in 1982 to $69 billion in 2006.
Whoa, that's a huge increase.
That's massive.
Where's all that money going?
Well, a big chunk of it fueled a prison construction boom.
Okay.
Back in the 1980s, there were only 44 private prisons in the U.S.
Wow.
Fast forward to 2002, that number more than doubled to 102.
Wow.
And that's not even counting
All the state ones.
all the state-run prison projects that were popping up.
It's almost like we're seeing this commodification of incarceration.
Yeah.
Like turning human lives into a potential source of profit.
Right.
Is this just the free market at work here?
Well, the argument that it's just the free market at work doesn't really hold up.
Okay.
These private prison companies rely heavily on government contracts and subsidies.
Oh, so they need the government.
Yeah, they're not thriving in a purely free market environment.
It's interesting. It makes you wonder about the motivations and the true costs here.
Yeah, it really does.
And this profit-driven approach.
It seems to seep into every aspect of the prison industry.
How?
We'll take the American Correctional Association, the ACA.
Okay.
They're not just some professional organization.
Right.
Their conferences, their journals, even their buyer's guide are essentially platforms for showcasing prison-related products and services.
Like a trade show.
It's like a trade show for everything prison-related.
And there are companies like Bob Barker Company
Bob Barker Company.
advertising there. And this
What,
isn't...
game show host?
Not the game show host, no.
Wow.
This is a company that supplies everything from inmate clothing and footwear to beds and laundry equipment.
Ah, they really do it all.
Yeah. And then you have the prison phone industry.
Oh, yeah.
Remember those old reach out and touch someone ads?
I do.
Well, in the prison system, that connection comes at a really steep price.
How so?
Companies have monopolies on prison phone services.
Right.
They charge families these ridiculous rates for calls that are essential for maintaining family ties and supporting rehabilitation.
It's crazy how expensive those calls are.
If maintaining those connections is so important for rehabilitation,
Yeah,
shouldn't we be making it easier for families to stay in touch?
that's a good point.
Not harder.
It's a real ethical dilemma,
Yeah.
Who benefits from this setup?
And at what cost?
At what cost to the individuals involved in society as a whole?
Yeah. We're unearthing this whole ecosystem here.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have organizations like the American Legislative Exchange Council.
ALEC.
ALE.
Right.
Most people probably haven't even heard of this group.
Yeah, most people don't even know it exists.
But they have so much influence.
They're really powerful.
It's like a behind-the-scenes thing.
Yeah, it's like a perfect example of how the prison industrial complex works behind the scenes.
Okay.
It's this group of state legislators, private corporations, and criminal justice officials.
Okay.
And, oh yeah, CCA is a member.
They're all in there.
Oh yeah, they're all members.
So they get together and basically come up with model legislation.
Right, they work together to draft model legislation.
And it often benefits,
They're corporate members.
even if it means pushing for harsher laws.
Even if it means pushing for harsher sentencing laws and increasing incarceration rates.
So they're actually shaping policy.
Or absolutely, they're directly shaping policy.
And they've been successful at it.
And they're very successful at it.
They're getting these laws passed.
Oh yeah, they boast about how many of their bills get passed each year.
Wow. And off with very little public scrutiny.
Often with minimal public scrutiny. It's crazy.
That's concerning.
It really is.
It makes you wonder about transparency and accountability.
Yeah, it raises serious questions about transparency and accountability in the legislative process.
It sounds like corporate interests are really shaping public policy.
It really highlights how corporate interests can shape public policy, and sometimes without the public even realizing it.
That's pretty scary.
It is.
And then there's the California Correctional Peace Officers Association.
The CCPOA.
The CCPOA.
Right.
This union represents prison guards.
Right.
They became super powerful in California.
They became incredibly powerful in California.
And they were advocating for policies that actually led to a huge increase in the prison population.
They were advocating for policies that led to a massive increase in the prison population.
Yeah. Their influence grew right alongside the number of inmates.
That's right.
Which seems like a conflict of interest.
Yeah, their influence grew right alongside the number of inmates.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big conflict of interest.
I mean, some of the things that they were doing,
What were they doing?
they were actually actively opposing college programs for inmates.
Oh, wow.
They were saying they didn't want taxpayer-funded education.
They were arguing against taxpayer-funded education for criminals. Yeah.
But studies show that education is one of the most effective ways to reduce recidivism.
That's right. Studies
Yeah.
consistently show that education is one of the most effective ways to reduce recidivism.
So is the goal really public safety, or is there something else going on?
Yeah, it makes you wonder what their true motivations are.
I remember the CCPOA actually put out this flyer
What did it say?
with this crazy language about
Or criminal language.
rapists, molesters, and murderers getting free college.
Oh, wow.
It felt more like fear-mongering than a genuine attempt to actually solve the problem.
Yeah, it sounds like they were more interested in stirring up fear than finding effective solutions.
So that brings us to another important issue, is privatization.
Privatization.
In the prison context,
Yeah.
it means private companies actually running prisons.
Yeah, private companies building and operating prisons under contract with the state.
And the argument is that they're more efficient and cost-effective.
Right, that's the usual argument.
But is that always true?
Well, the research suggests it's not that simple.
Okay.
There are often hidden costs.
What kinds of hidden costs?
Well, for example, the drive for profit can lead to corners being cut
right.
when it comes to things like staffing, security, and inmate health care.
So there's a tension here between the profit motive and the goal of rehabilitation.
Exactly.
If a company is making money by keeping prisons full, is there really an incentive to reduce recidivism?
Right. Does releasing inmates actually hurt their bottom line?
Yeah.
That's the big question.
I mean, CCA Corrections Corporation of America is an interesting case study here.
What happened?
They had a really strong start,
Okay.
and then their stock plummeted.
Yeah.
And they ended up needing a bailout from major Wall Street players,
Like who?
like Lehman Brothers.
Wow, so the big guys had to step in.
Yeah.
It's crazy how intertwined the prison industry is with high finance.
It's not just about business.
No.
It's about people's lives.
It's about people's lives being intertwined with high finance.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
And these patterns of these relationships and potential conflicts of interest,
They just keep popping up.
they keep recurring.
Yeah, they do.
Like there was a recent example in Arizona with Governor Jan Brewer.
What happened?
2 of her top advisors had close ties to CCA.
Really?
One even had a wife who was a lobbyist for them.
Wow, that's a pretty close connection.
And guess what? CCA got this huge contract to detain undocumented immigrants in Arizona,
Oh, wow.
bring in millions of dollars.
Yeah,
It just doesn't look good.
no, it doesn't look good at all.
It raises questions about impropriety.
Yeah, there's definitely an appearance of impropriety there.
You start to wonder if privatization is really the answer.
Right, if these kinds of entanglements are so common.
So with all these issues, you'd think the push for privatization would be slowing down.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But that's not really the case.
No.
There are actually signs that the prison boom is showing some cracks.
Really?
In some states, like New York and Mississippi, prison populations are actually going down.
Huh. That's surprising.
It's counter to what we've been hearing for so long.
Yeah, for decades we've been hearing about the need for more prisons.
So what's driving this shift?
Well, it's a combination of things.
Okay.
Changes in sentencing laws, a greater focus on alternatives to incarceration, and a growing awareness of the costs of mass incarceration.
But this decline has led to some interesting consequences. Well, like in New York, they actually had to lay off prison staff
Why?
because they didn't have enough inmates to fill the prisons they had built.
Wow. They built all these prisons, and now they don't have enough prisoners to fill them.
Yeah, I remember reading a quote from a prison worker who said, "Whoever thought crime would go down, whoever thought we would run out of inmates."
That's crazy.
It really highlights the unexpected consequences of these shifts.
It does. It makes you think about what happens when the system you've built your whole life around starts to crumble.
Yeah, and then you have Mississippi.
What about Mississippi?
Even a police chief who used to send people to prison all the time has started speaking out against the system.
Wow. A police chief speaking out against the prison system. That's pretty unusual.
Yeah, he was quoted as saying that for too many people, the only reason to build prisons is to make money off inmates.
Wow, that's a powerful statement coming from a police chief.
It seems like the ground is shifting here.
It seems like we're seeing a reevaluation of our beliefs about crime and punishment.
And then there's this study by Good Jobs First.
Okay, what did they find?
They found that private prisons,
Which are supposed to be all about free market efficiency,
right,
actually rely heavily on government subsidies.
really?
Yeah, they found that over 73% of private prisons had received some form of subsidy.
Like what?
Tax breaks, low-cost financing, government-funded infrastructure improvements.
So it's not a purely free market solution.
No, it seems like even the prison industry needs a helping hand from the government.
This whole thing is so complex.
It really is. It's a complex web of interconnected interests and motivations.
It makes you wonder what happens when profit takes precedence over rehabilitation and genuine public safety.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it?
Are we really invested in creating a system that promotes justice and rehabilitation?
Right.
Or are we okay with a system that prioritizes profit and punishment?
That's the conversation we need to be having as a society.
It feels like we've always just been told that more prisons and tougher sentences are the answer to crime.
Yeah, that's been the dominant narrative for a long time.
But does that actually work?
That's the question. Does it actually make us safer in the long run?
I mean, if we keep doing the same thing,
Right.
are we going to get different results?
The research suggests that just building more prisons and giving people longer sentences doesn't actually address the underlying causes of crime.
Okay, so if more prisons and longer sentences aren't the answer,
Yeah.
what is?
Well, it's complicated.
Okay.
There's no easy solution, but the evidence seems to point to shifting the focus from punishment to prevention and rehabilitation.
Okay.
It means investing in social programs that tackle things like poverty, addiction,
Yeah.
and mental health issues.
Those root causes.
Yeah, the underlying factors that often lead to criminal behavior.
Okay, so it's more of
A
a
holistic approach.
holistic approach.
Yeah, recognizing the complexities of these issues
Yeah.
and addressing them on multiple fronts.
That makes sense. But how do we actually make these changes happen?
Right.
I mean, we've seen how powerful the prison industrial complex is.
Yeah, it's deeply entrenched.
How do we overcome the people who benefit from the status quo?
It's a huge challenge,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's impossible. It's
Like-
going to take a lot of effort.
Like what?
We need to raise awareness about how flawed the current system is,
Okay.
and we need to show people that there are better ways to do things.
So changing the narrative.
Yep, changing the narrative.
From punishment to prevention.
Shifting the focus from punishment to prevention and genuine rehabilitation.
But how do we get people to listen?
We need to be vocal.
Okay.
We need to hold our elected officials accountable.
Push them to actually make changes.
Pushing them to enact policies that prioritize public safety and rehabilitation over profit.
It's about more than just talking.
It's about action.
We also can't ignore the fact that this system
Right.
really disproportionately impacts communities of color.
Absolutely. We can't talk about the prison industrial complex without acknowledging the systemic racism that's built into our criminal justice system.
Yeah. Black and brown people are incarcerated.
At much higher rates than white people.
Even when they're committing the same offenses.
Even when they're committing the same offenses, yeah.
It's a reminder that we haven't achieved.
True equality and justice.
Not even close.
And it's not just a historical issue.
Yeah.
It's happening right now.
Yeah.
From racial profiling to implicit bias to socioeconomic disparities, all these things contribute to the overrepresentation of people of color in the system.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes.
Me too.
It's made me realize that this isn't just about prisons.
Right.
It's about a whole way of thinking
It's a mindset.
that prioritizes punishment over rehabilitation and profit over people.
Yeah, it's a mindset that sees people as problems to be solved rather than individuals worthy of dignity and respect.
And that brings us back to what you were saying earlier.
Yeah,
If the goal is truly public safety,
yeah.
does the current system actually achieve that?
That's the question we have to ask ourselves.
What are the alternatives?
What other approaches might be more effective, more humane, more just...
Yeah, this has been a heavy conversation,
It has.
but
What-
incredibly important.
Absolutely. This is a conversation we should have been having a long time ago.
So for our listener,
Yeah.
if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by all this,
Yeah.
you're not alone.
It's a lot to take in.
But there are things you can do.
Right. You're not powerless.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a difference.
Like what?
You can support organizations working for criminal justice reform.
Okay.
You can advocate for policy changes,
Okay.
educate yourself and others,
Okay.
and most importantly, examine your own beliefs and biases.
It starts with us.
It starts with each of us being willing to question the status quo and demand a more just and equitable system.
That's a good point.
Don't let the size of the problem paralyze you.
Yeah.
Channel your concern into action.
Yeah.
Every voice, every action contributes to a better future.
That's a powerful message.
We can't just sit back and accept things as they are,
No, we have a responsibility to speak up
to advocate for change.
and to hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely. The future of our criminal justice system and really our society as a whole depends on the choices we make today.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
We hope it sparked your curiosity
And inspired you to learn more
and to get involved.
and to work towards a more just and equitable world for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.